back to you, Neville, on this second question then. From what you've recently done with obviously Invisible Foods hiring a CTO, how and when do you make that decision, which CTO to hire?
Yeah, well, the when, I'm going to start with the when first, because I think the when really should come when you have found your problem solution fit. You need to know exactly what problem you're dealing with, and like you need to make sure that you're aligned with the solution, because I have to think back into our journey with Invisible Foods. If we had had a CTO super early on, before we had locked in on our problem solution fit, then we would have spent more money than we actually would have needed to be spending at that particular moment in time. And then it would also have been a headache for the CTO to keep trying out to build products that are not yet the one that you want to be actually building in the first place. So it could have been a lot of time wasting, so to speak. I mean, there will always be, trial and error, but then you save yourself a lot of time and money wasting, especially because sometimes CTOs can be expensive, and then like that really increases your cash burn. And as a startup, the question is, how far can you go? And that always depends on how much you've got in your pocket. So that's the sort of when. The how, I would really advise that you actually you use a more professional recruitment process. I mean, like, I have to say, for us, I had hired the rest of our team members, just sort of off the cuff, off feeling, etc. But having hired our CTO using like a professional recruitment process and via Accelerate, that really made me realize how much more of an objective opinion you can have towards hiring, and how much better you can actually harness, let's say, the people that are around you to give you the opinion towards, is this the right person that we need to hire? And I think that's really, you remove a lot more biases, and you just make an objective decision that is most probably the best fit. So yeah.
No, thanks for that. I mean, it's some really interesting points you made. I think about sort of really trying to understand the fit, and about it's so easy to waste money if you go, for example, fully on with a full-time CTO, and the cost can be quite high, and obviously you need to make a lot of mistakes effectively and go through a lot of challenges and changes. So it's important to consider that as well. Payman, you've obviously experienced this, a lot with some of your fractional work as well, but yourself as a CTO, I mean, what are your thoughts behind this? Sort of how and when have you advised clients or done it yourself?
Yeah, so I will also answer the question when first. I think that's easier, definitely. So when I see startups and when they're in the kind of early stage, then I definitely tell them always to hire someone who's really like a really good coder who can create something, because in the beginning you need to try so many different things and maybe pivot and do something else at some point. So you need this kind of flexibility and someone who's really able to build this kind of solution which you imagine to have. So at that point, I would say you need someone who's really like a coder, like a strong coder, but with the potential to become a CTO. So that's always what I try to find for startups in that kind of early stage. When it comes to some kind of Series A growing period, I had this kind of experience by myself. So like I was part of a company and I had a CTO. I was the director of engineering. So I became the director of engineering in this company. And then we realized, okay, we can't do everything at the same time. You can't be fully deeply into the technology part and look at the architecture and jump even into the code, and at the same time take care of 30 people, do the organizational structure, manage the people in the US, the people in London. So what we decided at that point, to separate really the positions, to have someone who's more like a manager role and another one who is more on the technical side. And when you become even a bigger company, then it goes more into the direction of collaboration, cooperation with other departments. So much more strategic focus, and even some kind of political role sometimes, so it goes more in that direction. And about the how, I would agree with Neville that it's very much like have a good, not too long process of finding the right people. Take a deep look on the culture in the company and try to find someone who fits really into this kind of team, because it's a pretty important role.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's probably one of the most important when you think about as a software business. It's kind of the underpinning of the existence of the business. Heather, have you got any thoughts on that? Anything to add to what's been expressed already?
Yeah, so I agree with Peyton that you need to have somebody who can grow into a more kind of management kind of role, overseer kind of role. But I also struggle a little bit with this hire a coder. So I've done a lot of project recoveries where startups have built something with a coder, and it's challenging at the point where they've invested a lot of money and then done the next step. So the advice I always give startups is actually you can do a lot of this yourself. So you can, and I highly recommend using low code, no code to start off with, because then you can build products, test out your product market fit before you invest time and money into technology that you've built, and before you invest time and money into a CTO. So actually, how much do you actually need a CTO at the very beginning is my question to most startups. And you can do, I mean, this is where fractional CTOs come into force, really. You might need some hand-holding in terms of like, what should I do? How should I do it? That might be an hour out of like 4 months, and you can pay for that fractionally. So, from a cost perspective, and this is where I agree with Neville, you have to be careful. It costs a lot to hire a CTO, and then you've got that commitment of actually keeping them in the business. So for my own business, I'm hiring as absolutely late as possible, and I'm using fractional CISOs, fractional DPOs, fractional everything, because actually I can just get the point expertise I need at any point. But then I'm actually not building, so I'm just questioning, right, to get that product market fit. So I'm doing the lowest kind of prototyping, right? Prototyping without a build at all. So, I mean, and I'm a CTO. So I think that runway, just don't dive into development straight away. That might not be what you need. And really ask yourself, could I do low code, no code? And what would I need to do that? Maybe I could do it myself. A lot of people I know have taught themselves how to use low code, no code, and they're just running with that and having really successful businesses in early stages using that. So yeah, I think as late as possible, basically, because it's just expensive, as Neville said.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And you touched on some discussion points we're going to have later about the whole fractional sort of side of things and how that can maybe pivot in, particularly with young startups and early stages, where they can take the value of that short, one-off sort of use rather than a sort of a full time. Neville, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think like also what then meddles, let's say, with the sort of wisdom that's being shared right now is the fact that sometimes we get put pressure on by the investors who then look at you and then they say, oh wait, you're building software, who's your CTO? And then you're like, oh well, actually for financial reasons we don't have one or whatever. And that for them sometimes doesn't give the type of confidence that they would ideally like to have, because obviously if you're in the early stages, investors are investing in team, because they appreciate the fact that whatever you're pitching today might not be the reality when you really deep dive and get into the business. And so they do expect you to then have, let's say, a technical someone who you can lean on in times of cash, no cash, in times of good times, bad times. That you've got a technical someone that you just lean on and you say, okay, even though we have nothing, with our own resources amongst each other, we can be able to push something forward. However, try your best not to give into this pressure, because at the end of the day, you have to balance it out somehow. And that's why I come back to what Payman said. Sometimes maybe all you do need is just a coder, for example, or sometimes like Heather's saying, you actually just go low code. No code, like, because you can achieve so much in that space, and then you know exactly what you're building, what kind of technology, and then you find the right person who's the right fit. So it's a sort of balancing act between what you need as a company and what the investors want to see from you as a company in order to put their money into you.
Yeah, that's a good point. The whole financial side of things, and obviously the investment, where does that come in? It's something obviously I've noticed as well when we speak with other firms, other startups, is that you often see sort of head of engineering or sort of VP engineering being the most senior technical talent, and then they get to a scaling point where maybe then suddenly the business side of things needs someone more savvy, let's say a technical person who can understand the business context. So I think that's something as well about the size you mentioned about whether they, I guess, small enough to not really need one. But that's a point we'll discuss in a minute. So I mean, thanks very much for that. It's very interesting insights there, and I'm sure there's a lot more we can go and dive into that.